This episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast is brought to you by those awesome gentlemen at Byrd Campbell, PA, your Duke-centric law firm with offices in Florida and Texas. Byrd Campbell means business. Duke fans, we are back with episode 126 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. First and foremost, this is Donald here in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be the host this week, and we come to you on this Sunday morning, September 16th, hoping that all of you that are in or around the Carolinas are safe after Hurricane Florence. We know some of you are likely without power or suffered property damage during this vicious storm, but we sincerely hope all of you are okay. That's priority number one for us. I'm going to bring in our co-host here. First off, Sam, down in Durham, great to hear from you. And hopefully you guys were spared some of the worst that Florence down there.
Yeah, so we actually had classes canceled. The whole university was closed up Thursday and Friday, but the storm actually ended up moving south of us, as I'm sure a lot of folks know, that the storm ended up really hitting southern North Carolina and the coast of South Carolina the worst. So here in Durham, we only had brief big rain and wind. It was rainy and windy a good chunk of the weekend, but it never got all that severe. I didn't lose power except for one temporary blackout when the power went out and came right back on. I had a couple friends who did, but overall, I don't think the damage here was so bad. But it does mean that I haven't had anything really productive to do in like 4 days. So I will note that I have been doing my homework and trying to stay ahead. But man, I'm on day 4 of being at home, and I'm starting to get a little restless.
A little cabin fever, I assume that's
yes,
always it's always something that happens during hurricanes. But glad you're safe down there. Glad everybody in Durham is okay. And down in Atlanta, we have Jason Evans. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We really haven't caught much at all of the storm. There was a forecast track for it a few days ago that was going to take it over Atlanta. And we were like, because we don't, you get 30-mile-an-hour winds in Atlanta, you get 1 million people without power. It can be brutal, but it has avoided us as well. So, so we're doing fine down here in Atlanta, and I had a great deal of fun watching Duke football this weekend. But we're not going to get to that yet, are we?
Not yet. And for the the hurricane tip, I think is going to slightly affect all of us because we're getting the remnants here in DC for the next couple of days. It's supposed to arrive later on this evening. We'll get a lot of rain over the next few days, but nothing in comparison to what the Southern Carolinas are doing right now. But before we get into football, before we even get into basketball, we have a special thing we want to talk about. And Sam, I'll give it to you to share the details.
Sure. So we are looking at planning a Duke Basketball Report podcast live show in celebration of me being here. Therefore, the logistics are finally, I think, easy enough for us to work out. Previously, you guys are in different East Coast cities. I was out west, and getting us all together for a game, I think, would have been hard. But the idea we're going with for this is that we want Donald and Jason to come here to Durham for a basketball game sometime during the season, and we'll then do a live show somewhere around Duke and Durham soon after the game ends. So the idea being maybe we start like an hour after the game. The idea being that if you are at the game or if you are around Durham, you'd be able to attend. So we haven't picked a specific date or a venue yet. What we want to do first is get an idea of the interest in doing a thing like this, because then we can try to figure out how many, what size venue we would get. And I'm looking at a couple different venues that would be able to provide some light food and beverage at the thing. So we've set up a survey. We already posted this actually on the DBR forum, but we wanted to mention it here on the show, knowing that not everyone reads the forum. So we have a survey that we wrote up. It's very quick. If you go to tinyurl.com/DBR live, tinyurl.com/DBR live. That's the survey that just asks, would you be interested in attending this game? We would do it. We would do it following a weekend game. So one of the Saturday or Sunday men's basketball games in Cameron, folks would be able to get to the game. We obviously can't provide tickets for the game. That is a different beast in and of itself.
Hey, wait. Let's just say it. Let's just say we're looking at the Army game on Saturday, November 11th.
All right, fine.
Because if you look at the schedule,
no, that'd be Sunday, November 11th.
I'm sorry, Sunday. No, they're not a lot of other options.
Well, there are a couple other Saturday games, aren't there?
Yeah, we could do Stetson on December 1st, but folks, just so you know, we're kind of planning on the Sunday, November 11th. Probably.
Way to just blow up my spot here, Jason. That's okay. All right. So that being said, Sunday Army game. The game's at 1 p.m. We'd probably start the show like around 4 o'clock. The UNC football game is also that weekend. So we should have a lot to talk about, and hopefully it'll be a very fun weekend for Duke. So if you think you could make it to that thing, knowing that it's somewhere around Duke and Durham, because I don't exactly know where it's going to be yet. But if you think you could make it, please fill out the survey. Let us know, because that'll help us kind of gauge attendance, and then I can figure out which of those places is going to make the most sense. So check that out, and that's good. If you have questions about that, email them to us, dbrpodcast@gmail.com, and we will, I'll let you know kind of what's going on.
And Sam's hooking Donald and me up with tickets, right, Sam? You got tickets for us? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm still working on that.
We'll figure it out. Well, before we get into Duke football, which had a great weekend, guys, what podcast is this?
I think this is Duke Football Report, but maybe we're still Duke Basketball Report?
We are still the Duke Basketball Report. You're damn right we are. You know what we got last week? We got a full basketball schedule. This past week, the ACC released a full conference schedule to add to the non-conference schedule, which we had already been released. So Duke's full 2018-19 season slate is set, and we are kicking off with Countdown to Craziness on Friday, October 19th, and going all the way to Dayton Chapel Hill against the Tar Heels on Saturday, March 9th. Sam, I'm going to start with you. Give us your thoughts on the schedule and what you like and dislike about it.
So the conference schedule starts after a really long layoff this year. I know that usually Duke takes time off for a little bit for exams, like a week for exams, and then they maybe take a week for Christmas. This year, after that Texas Tech game on December 20th, which is still well before Christmas break starts, the Blue Devils then are off for over 2 weeks before hosting Clemson. So it's going to feel like a big break for the fans and for us and for the team. So expect that first Clemson game to be a challenge, and also because the students don't come back to Duke until the following week. But the nice thing is that that'll be perhaps the only game that is really lightly attended by students, because there aren't any other games over winter break. The Princeton game is right after exams end, so I don't know, maybe kids will stick around. But after that, there's a couple things that I like to look for in the schedule. And I know Jason is going to talk more specifically about the opponents and how they break down. What I like to look for and what I find is interesting are the quick turnarounds. In the past, Duke and some other ACC teams have been given tough breaks on having like a Saturday game and then like a Saturday night game and then a Monday game, or they have a Sunday afternoon game and then they have a Tuesday game. This schedule doesn't really have as many of those traps. There are only 2 quick turnaround game, quick in air quotes turnaround games. Those are both Saturday afternoon to Monday night games, and the first of those is a road game followed by a home game, which is a little easier. That's we're at Florida State in January and then come home on a Monday night against Syracuse. And then a couple weeks later, Duke hosts Georgia Tech on a Saturday afternoon and then heads to Notre Dame. So the first thing that I think about are those quick turnarounds, and Duke is not an especially large victim to that. The other one that I look at is how the UNC game is placed in the schedule and what else is in its vicinity. So this year, the UNC game, the first UNC game, the one in Cameron, is a little bit later than usual. It's February 20th. I think that's a week later than it usually is, but it's on a Wednesday. The games around it, though they are hard, are both on Saturdays. So there's plenty of time for Duke to get excited about the UNC game and then also recover from it no matter what happens. Now, the other thing that I wanted to note, and that I think Jason is going to talk more about, is that Duke has a really hard ACC schedule this year. They obviously they obviously play UNC and Wake twice. That's every year. But the other two teams that Duke drew twice this year are Virginia and Syracuse, who both look to be really competitive in the ACC and nationally. So Duke has to get both of those teams twice there, and UNC and Syracuse and Virginia are all kind of clumped together in February. So that's going to be really hard. And Duke also has road games in tough environments where we know the Blue Devils have struggled before, like Louisville and Virginia Tech and Florida State. And then the only other note that I wanted to make sure I threw in here was that Duke's first game against Jeff Capel's Pittsburgh Panthers up at the Oakland Zoo is January 20th. Capel won't return to Cameron this year, so that we'll have to wait for next
January
year.
22nd.
22nd.
January
Right,
22nd.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my like bird's eye view of the schedule. I want to get more in the weeds on it, but I think Jason's got better thoughts on it than I am, because he's the, he gets more emotional about this than I do.
I am well into the weeds. I am weed deep in this thing. So here's what I did when I looked at just the ACC portion of the schedule. We knew the non-conference schedule for the most part. I sort of broke it down into some tiers. There are really 4 teams in the ACC that think they are Final Four contenders. There are other teams that have aspirations for it, but there are 4 teams in the ACC that really look at this season and they go, you know what? I mean, according to the preseason polls, according to what everyone's talking about, we've got the kind of team that could make the Final Four. Wouldn't be a shock if we were in the Final Four. And those 4 teams are Duke. Well, we can't play ourselves, but the other 3 are Virginia, UNC, and Syracuse. If you look at preseason rankings, Virginia's in everyone's top 5, UNC's in everyone's top 5, 8, 10, and Syracuse is generally around number 12 or so. These are teams that all are going to, expect to make the Sweet 16 and have a shot at the Final Four. So, as you mentioned, UNC twice and Syracuse twice. That's really, really difficult. I mean, really difficult. Then the next tier, there's 3 more teams that show up in some like top 25s, top 20s. These are teams that probably have good aspirations of making the Sweet 16 or so. Certainly teams that expect to make the NCAA tournament: Virginia Tech, Florida State, and Clemson. We have each one of those teams once. And then there are 4 sort of bubble teams: NC State, Notre Dame. Sorry, 5 bubble teams really: NC State, Notre Dame, Boston College, Miami, and Louisville, who everyone says, these are probably like, in the 30s or 40s nationally. We play each one of them once. And then there are only 3 teams in the ACC that probably, are not looking at any postseason, probably not contenders to make the NCAA tournament at all. That's Wake, Georgia Tech, and Pitt. And we play Wake twice, but Georgia Tech and Pitt once. So as you indicated, the schedule, the teams that we drew twice, the tougher games, are the really good teams. And I want to go even deeper in the weeds on it. I want to talk about a stretch that Duke has. Gentlemen, Duke has it's a 7-game stretch that I don't see any way that we win more than 4 of them. We play at Virginia on February 9th. We then play at Louisville on February 12th. Louisville, by the way, is a team that we are just 5-5 against over our past 10 games. And at Louisville, I mean, you just don't win at Louisville. We then have NC State at home. That's the only quote unquote easy game in this stretch. It's just brutal. And NC State, by the way, beat us last year. All rivalry game, they'll be up for it. We then have Carolina at home. Then we go on the road for Syracuse and Virginia Tech, who, as I already mentioned, Syracuse in everyone's top 15, Virginia Tech in everyone's top 20. That's a gauntlet. That is so difficult. Again, at UVA, at Louisville, at home for NC State and UNC, and then at Syracuse and at Virginia Tech.
Jason, do a quick.
It's 6, not 7 games.
No. I wasn't even going to correct that because.
Oh, okay.
Whatever. Math is beneath me. But imagine if that NC State game was on the road.
Oh yeah, no way.
Yeah,
we'd be like the season is over. Not that we've ever had a year where we aren't freaking out about the conference slate in the middle of it. But man, if that NC State game was on the road, that would be so nuts.
Those 6 games, you're going to be playing you're going to be probably playing 5 ranked teams in those 6 games. It's only NC State, like I say, who's and how can NC State, who always gets up for Duke, who when they're bad, they play well against Duke. How can that be your only easy game? We could go 3-3 in that 6-game stretch. We'll be jumping for joy. It'll be amazing. And I'll tell you that I think the schedule. I don't think Duke can win the conference with this schedule. I really don't. I mean, we knew it was coming. We sort of knew we were getting Virginia and Syracuse twice this year, but I think the schedule is too hard and it's too backloaded. The front half of the schedule has all the easy games. The only easy games in the back half of the schedule are like I said, that NC State game and Wake Forest at home. Wake at home is like the only easy game in this schedule. Our other home games in the back half of the schedule are NC State at home, North Carolina at home, Wake at home, and Miami at home. And Miami, by the way, is going to be fighting for an NCAA tournament bid when they play us. You know, it's a brutal schedule. I don't want folks to get down if this Duke team, if we go 12-6 against this ACC schedule, I'll be doing cartwheels. That's how hard it is.
Well, I think the ACC is going to be hard, but before you do that, a couple of notes that I saw when I first looked at the schedule. Sam mentioned the Pittsburgh game on January 22nd, and while yes, that's the one game that we face Jeff Capel and we'll face him for the first time, I was particularly interested to note that it's a 9 p.m. start, which means that ESPN really likes that storyline and that they're going to probably have a few days where they're hyping that storyline of Jeff Capel playing against coaching against his coach K for that game. So I thought that was particularly interesting. You noted that how late the UNC game, the first one, is. We actually have not played that late since 2014 when we had that snowstorm in Durham that canceled the first game that was supposed to be in Chapel Hill, and we ended up playing on February 20th was the rescheduled date. So I noted that as well. But I agree with you, Jason, in this sense. I do think that the back half is completely loaded. What this could mean is that maybe, in previous years, we've had some teams that just don't gel properly. And with, freshmen, you get thrown into ACC season immediately and they just don't have a chance to really gel. We've seen that in the last couple of years. But I think this schedule actually sets up for us to be a gelled team by the time February comes around. So I'm not as doom and gloom on the back half of the schedule as you might be, only because I think this gives our young guys a chance to really find out what this team can be and work to that point. Yeah, we're going to have a couple of missteps in February, most likely. It's very hard to go undefeated, but you're going to have missteps. But I think if we are clicking by the time February starts, I'm not going to be as worried, because I think that this team, if it's clicking and we have all our guys going in the right pace and working well together, I don't look at any of these teams and say, oh my God, they're going to absolutely beat us, even on the road. So I do like how I do like how that sets up for our team, the core of our team and the gelling of our team. But I agree that this back half is going to be one where we're going to need oxygen.
Hey guys, can I just comment on one thing about the nature of the way the schedule sets up? There are a couple times where we are just going to be exhausted teams. Like we play Syracuse and Virginia back to back. Those are going to be two, like slog games, two teams where, hey, can you get to 50 points? Because they play such tough physical defense. They force you into bad shots. And then later in the year, we play Virginia and Louisville back to back. And, the closest comparison to Syracuse and Virginia is Louisville in terms of playing physical defense and really being tough on you. I think those two stretches in mid-January and then early February, the Syracuse, Virginia, and then the Virginia, Louisville stretch, really, going to be those are games that will weigh on the psyche of our young guys who are probably they're probably really used to having things go well for them. And it's tough to have things go well against Syracuse, Virginia, and Louisville.
One also thing that I noted on the schedule, I don't know if this is ESPN's doing or if this is the ACC's doing, but they sure do like to put us against Notre Dame in the last Monday in January. I don't know how that works, but like I feel like the last few years we've played at South Bend in the last like week or so of January, and it's usually after a Saturday home game. Then we go to the road there. So I thought that was interesting to note that we have once again on Monday, January 28th, a 7 p.m. game in South Bend against Notre Dame, where traditionally we have not played well. Today's episode is sponsored by Dominate Test Prep. Founded by Duke alum Brett Etheridge, Dominate Test Prep provides online courses for the GMAT and GRE that are flexible, affordable, and most importantly, that teach Brett's proven test-taking strategies and produce high scores on test day. If you or someone you know is looking to get into a top school like Duke, let a guy who bleeds Duke blue help. You can learn more at dominatetestprep.com. Use the coupon code GODEVILS to save 10% off any course package. So now we get into the football side of things, and Duke Gang traveled down to Waco, Texas to take on the Baylor Bears yesterday. It was a matchup where Duke, in my mind, completely dominated the first half and eventually held on, despite some mistakes in the second half, to win 40-27. We are now 3-0 on the season, and we're looking quite good in the process. But before we get into the recap of this game, you may recall our last episode where Jason had some pointed things to say about Baylor's defense. Well, a Baylor fan forum caught wind of our podcast and Jason's thoughts on Baylor, and were none too happy about it. The funny thing is some actually agreed with Jason's assessment, but others were angry and taking shots at Jason and the show. So, Jason, I'm going to start with you. A 40-27 victory. What do you have to say to those critics now?
Oh, can I just continue laughing for a little while?
You sure can. You have the floor.
I do want to say to the Baylor fans, they were actually really nice. They were pretty respectful, I thought, in the interactions that we had. I actually went to the bulletin board that was talking about the podcast and talking about my analysis. They called me a football analyst. I was like, I'm really not a football analyst, guys.
Yeah, you got promoted. You didn't take us for the ride. That's messed up, man.
I freely admit that I did a little bit of research on Baylor, not a ton of research. Confession time, people. We don't have time sometimes to do like really exhaustive, take notes and watch game film kind of research on Duke's opponents. So I told the Baylor fans, look, I may have gotten things wrong, but I was shocked by how many of them were agreeing with me. Mm-hmm. Like if you'd come to the Duke bulletin board and talk some trash, I think, I would have been surprised if you've seen a lot of agreement from Duke fans. They would have defended, pretty strenuously. And the Baylor fans were like, yeah, he's kind of right. Our defense isn't that good. Whew. Their defense was really awful because Duke was playing with a backup quarterback, and Quentin Harris showed it. That said, once Quentin Harris got settled down, this game turned into a blowout. And I'm not sure anyone thought that was going to happen. And it was absolutely great to see. Harris is the story of the game. How can he not be? He starts out the game, I think he was 1 for 7 or 1 for 8, throwing nothing but like short screen passes, and he couldn't even complete like passes to his running backs. He looked like a guy who was uncomfortable. He looked like a guy who wasn't clear where he wanted to go. He looked nervous on about half of the passing plays. He would pull it down and try to run, and he was running out of fear, not out of designed runs. And then it's like something clicked. He realized, you know what? I can do this. I can do this against the Baylor defense at least. And suddenly he was really good. Now, let's be clear. He finished 12 for 30. And he's got to get his accuracy's got to get better than that. But a lot of that was because when Quentin Harris got in trouble, he just threw the ball away. He's like, what's an incompletion? It means nothing. He never forced anything. He didn't try and force the ball into tight spaces. He knew an incomplete pass was better than a sack. He was really, really smart. I mean, fourth year redshirt junior, you could see those years of experience. This is a guy who had 15 career passes before this, so he doubled the number of passes in his career in this game. And I just loved the the TD pass to TJ Ramming in the first half. Harris had done nothing but these little, I mentioned nothing but these short screen passes. And so he pump fakes a screen, and the entire Baylor defense they think this guy doesn't throw deep. He's going to do nothing but throw short passes. So the entire Baylor defense jumps on it. TJ sprints wide open, and we get an easy touchdown. And it was like, to me, that was the moment when I was like, Quentin Harris is a smart quarterback. He knows what he's doing. And then the TD pass to Lloyd with 2 minutes left in the first half, where Lloyd catches it one-handed. It was a great delivery and an incredible one-handed catch. Lloyd's right hand never touches the ball the entire play. And that Baylor defense, the Baylor saved an assist on the play because he absolutely takes out the cornerback and lets Lloyd run the last 40 yards with no one near him. That put Duke, I think that made it 23-0 at the half. And you're like, the ball game for all intents and purposes was pretty much over. And I don't think anyone thought that this would be a game that would be over at halftime. Duke was a 6.5-point underdog in Vegas at the start of the week. Eventually, the line moved to only Baylor by 3.5. But it was Baylor by 6.5 when the week started, and I said quite loudly, if I was in Las Vegas, I would put a lot of money on Duke. Folks, I hope you went to your bookie and you made big money on this game, because this was easy money. Duke was clearly the better team.
Sam?
Yeah, so Jason said a lot of the he covered a lot of the good stuff. The things that I wanted to go back to, the Duke defense continues to struggle with injuries. So Gilbert, we knew is now out for the rest of the season. Cornerback Michael Carter also left early in the game with an injury, and the defense once again was very bend but don't break. Baylor ended up churning out a lot of yards on offense, but they missed 2 field goals, which Duke was able to capitalize on. And then I thought one of the big plays of the game, although as Jason noted, the game felt like it was sort of over at halftime. One of the big plays was that pick 6 by Leonard Johnson in the fourth quarter when Baylor was sort of in its last ditch. And we had talked previously about Duke had, a 7-game streak of not allowing points in the fourth quarter. They finally did give up fourth quarter points on Saturday against Baylor, but it was too little too late because they had built that huge lead in the first half, and the defense seemed to turn it back on right in time, but all over the place, making good plays, and the interception and another fumble recovery led to a 2-0 turnover margin for Duke. They continue to control the ball well and to take it away at opportune times. The other thing that impressed me was that Duke didn't commit any penalties against Baylor. They're very disciplined. They don't make mistakes like that. Like Jason was saying, Harris was only 12 for 30, and despite that, it seemed like he was, he sort of knew what he was doing. He wasn't playing as well as he wanted to, or probably as Coach Cutcliffe wanted him to be, but he was taking care of the ball. The offensive line was protecting him enough, which I don't think they did for Daniel Jones, because that injury came on a sack, the injury that's going to keep Jones now out for a few more weeks. But I liked the way the offense sort of stayed controlled. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't commit penalties. There weren't stupid unforced errors. And then honestly, going back on the defense, they did get a little lucky that Baylor missed those field goals, and that there were some dropped passes by Baylor that the defense wasn't near. So in that regard, I think the defense still has some improvements to make.
Did the ball have grease on it in the first half? Whenever Baylor had the ball, I think it was covered with grease, because they had 5 drops in the first half, and several of them were like ridiculous. Literally, ball hits you in the stomach and you can't hold on to it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, if they don't want to be disciplined, they don't have to be. There's no rule about that. And on that same topic, I did enjoy how chippy the Duke players on both sides of the ball were getting with Baylor. I know that one of the touchdowns was it Ramming's touchdown where he ran it in, or where he caught it and turned immediately to start jawing at the
it was the first one.
At the Baylor defensive back, he wasn't even done. He wasn't even done like completing the play and was already yelling at him. So I like that. I think that our players deserve to be able to show a little fire on the field, and they played well. And Baylor didn't come within 10 points. at all in the second half. So a really remarkable performance by Duke. Even though Harris didn't have the best day statistically, I am impressed with the way that he kind of handled the game and knew when to. He made a few option reads. I liked on that first touchdown of the game where he sort of took a view of the play and then quick option handed it off to Deion Jackson for the easy score. It seemed like he had a solid handle on the game plan. He has another week coming up against NC Central that shouldn't be too difficult. We know that NC Central does not bring the kind of athletes that Baylor or Virginia Tech bring to a game. So the game this week hopefully should be easier for Duke so that they can really get ready for that big matchup against Virginia Tech that is looking like it's going to be, two undefeateds, a lot like the game Duke played last year against Miami at the end of September, where they looked pretty strong early in the season. So I'm not that I want to overlook North Carolina Central, but I am very much looking forward to that Virginia Tech game here at Wallace Wade.
You guys mentioned a couple of things, or a lot of things that I was going to mention. So I'll note a couple more things. The first thing was they have a saying in the Duke program for football is next man up. And that's something that has really played over the last couple of weeks with injuries. And I feel like, every single guy on the team made a play during this game, whether it was offense, whether it was defense, even special teams had the block field goal to keep the goose egg on the scoreboard. They all made different plays at different times. And if someone went down, another guy was ready to take their place. I think that's a great, mentality to have, that everyone seemed like they were ready for this game. They knew that Baylor was going to be fast. They knew that Baylor was going to run the ball. They knew that Baylor could beat them on the throw as well. And every single player on the team was ready to play that game. You need those type of victories, those type of games if you want to go far in college football. So I really liked that about this team. The other thing was getting back to Quentin Harris. I don't know if you guys noticed this during the game, but that kid was smiling the entire game. He was clearly having a lot of fun. Even when things were a struggle early on, he would go back to the sideline and he was smiling. And it was clear that he was like, hey, I'm going to get the hang of this. Don't worry, everyone. And I think that calmed everybody down. The defense was eager to go out and play to get them back on offense so that they could, get some points on the board. The offense was ready to contribute for him, and when he settled down, that's when this team really took off. I mean, they were already calm. A couple of 3 and outs or a couple of 4 and outs or whatever. We're not anything that were demoralizing to the team. And I think that is something to be said in a high pressure situation of his, a guy who's coming in after the star quarterback goes down and puts on a performance like that with a smile on his face the entire game. I really, really like that. Jason, did you have something else before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about how disciplined and how well coached this Duke team is. Just really quickly, it's amazing. We are a team that does not make mistakes at all. We don't beat ourselves. We play really smart. We force the other team to always execute at the highest level, and when they don't, we punish them. Sam made note of it, but it absolutely must be spoken about again. Duke had 0 penalties in this game. That is a really rare thing in college football. It's a really big deal. We had 4 penalties against Northwestern, 4 against Army, and 4 is a good sort of stable number. I can't compliment Coach Cutt and his staff enough for how disciplined they've got these guys playing football. And that's the way you win football games. It's so impressive. Duke's turnover margin on the season is now 6-1. We've got 6 takeaways, 2 in every game, and we have 1 turnover on the season. And we had a backup quarterback playing this game. I mean, it's amazing what these guys are doing. It's really impressive. And the last thing I want to note is we now have 2 road wins against Power 5 conference teams. We've gone on the road. Now, road win is difficult. A road win against a team from a major conference, that is super hard to do. There's no other team in the country right now that can say that. I haven't double checked that someone may come back and tell me that I'm wrong, but I can't imagine there's another team in the country that has 2 Power 5 road wins at this point in the season. It's tremendously impressive. I just want to tip my cap to what the Duke coaches are doing to this, for this team to be executing at this level.
I just wanted to add on top of that, Jason, that a few years ago when Duke announced that they were going to be playing a home and home with Baylor, I think the collective thought was, well, I guess that's cool because we're playing a team from another major conference and we get those extra games, but we're probably not going to win those games. It might just be fun exposure. Mm-hmm. And now some of these games are sort of on Baylor and all the various scandals and issues that program has had the last few years. But looking back now, that home and home turned into 2 wins for Duke. And that really says, on top of sort of what you were saying, it says a lot about this coaching staff and how well they've gotten the players to prepare for these games. Duke continues to be a really strong team on the road, and they provided, again, that they make it through NC Central. They'll get through this non-conference portion of the season this year undefeated. And that is not something that we expected of Duke even a few years ago, especially against a non-conference schedule that, while it doesn't feature the best of the best, Army, Northwestern, and Baylor are all competitive programs. And it's really nice to see Duke handle all of them as easily as they did.
You ready for a great stat? And then we can move on to an NC Central preview. In Duke's last 25 games against non-ACC teams, our last 25 non-conference games, 25 games, Duke is 22-3. That's
not bad.
Crazy.
That's awesome.
That is crazy. Great stat.
Okay, next up, 3-0 Duke football will return home after 2 weeks away from home to play in the Bull City Gridiron Classic against NC Central. It's homecoming, and this should be one of those games where it's a relatively easy affair. So instead of previewing this game, I want to do it in a way where I'm asking you both the question. I'm going to start with you, Jason. What's the one thing that Duke should focus on improving against NC Central?
Well, I'll tell you that sometimes when we have something like this where we're each going to say something, I like to try and find something maybe a little more obscure or analytical or, whatever it may be, so that I'm not doing something really obvious. I'm going to go for the obvious. Sorry, guys. Against NC Central, I want to see Quentin Harris's completion percentage be higher. I want him to work on his accuracy. I thought his decision making was pretty good. He mostly went for the sort, as I discussed, the easy and the safe decision all the time. I wouldn't mind if he tried a little bit more. I mean, against a team like NC Central, where Duke is just physically going to, we're probably going to manhandle them at both lines of scrimmage in a very big way. I'd like to see Quentin Harris stretch himself some, because when we play Virginia Tech, he's going to have to do that. And we don't know when Daniel Jones is going to be back. For Duke to be all that we can be, we're going to have to get a little bit better play out of Quentin Harris until Daniel Jones returns, hopefully at some point. So I'm Jones. I want to see that completion percentage well above 50% against NC Central. That'd be a big thing for me.
What about you, Sam?
I want to see the starters play as little as possible this week, because Virginia Tech is tough and big and physical and might be the best team in the conference next to Clemson this year. So I want to see the Duke starters have to play as little as possible. There have been a lot of injuries. I don't want to see any more to the key pieces. And even though the depth is improved, you really want the starters to be in there for most of the game against Virginia Tech.
So the one thing that I think we should improve on is something that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks, and it's our containment around the edge on defense against the run. Against Baylor, there was a few times where they actually got out in the open space, and it was because guys came around the edge, and we didn't have a guy there to contain the runner and drive them back towards the middle where our players are. That's something that I think we could get exposed against Virginia Tech if we're not careful. So against NC Central, they have some fast guys who will give us a good test around the edges. And I think if we can focus on containing, that's really going to help limit the number of yards that running backs will gain against us. That's going to help us win football games. Today's podcast is proudly sponsored by two Duke alums and former roommates, Jamie Campbell and Tucker Byrd, both diehard Duke followers and the founders of Byrd Campbell, PA, a Duke-centric business law firm with offices in Dallas, Orlando, and the Gulf Coast. Having watched or cheered Duke football and basketball teams through close to 3,000 games, you can say they are true blue. Reach out to those guys at byrdcampbell.com. That's BYRDCAMPBELL.com. If for nothing else but to say, to hell with Carolina, to hell with Carolina. All right, now we get to parting shots, and I will start with Sam.
We've noted that Duke football has gotten some big wins on the road this year against Power 5 teams, and as of now, they are quickly climbing up the advanced metrics for the college football rankings. We don't talk, I think, as much about the rankings for football as we do here about KenPom on the basketball side. But Duke does look really strong right now on the rankings, and there's a chance that come the Virginia Tech game, we'll be hosting a top 25 matchup at Wallace Wade Stadium. Now, I can't guarantee that because Duke doesn't have much of an opportunity this week to prove anything to the voters, but they do look really strong. They're only a few spots out of both the AP Top 25 and the coaches poll as of last week. And perhaps one more week, and perhaps having that schedule say 4-0 rather than 3-0 is going to look a lot stronger. But come that Virginia Tech game, there should be a lot of hype. And especially now, if Duke beats Virginia Tech, they're in the top 25. That's I think is almost a given. But look for them climbing the rankings here in the next few weeks. And as we've noted, with a lot of backups in key roles right now for the Blue Devils.
Duke number 17 in the Massey rankings. And that's as advanced, there, like you said, there isn't really a KenPom. The Massey rankings are as close to KenPom as you can get. Duke is number 17 in the Massey rankings.
Hey, if we keep winning, they can't keep us out. That's pretty much the bottom line. So let's just keep winning. Jason, your parting shot.
Guys, have you all been watching the Duke Blue Planet videos?
I have them all teed up to watch this week, but tell us about them because they're very, very fascinating.
Oh, they're beautiful. First of all, they're really well. I'm a video producer type guy. These are really nicely produced. They have great access to the team. The latest one is about building the team. And folks, you have to watch it. It's a great 8 minutes or so because it really shows you how much Coach K and the coaching staff understands that it's not just about what these guys do on the court. It's about making them into a cohesive unit off the court as well. They talk about, they go to cookouts at Coach K's house. The whole team goes ziplining together. They do things together. Nate James, one of the assistant coaches, talks about the fact that they don't want any cliques on the team. He doesn't want like the veterans versus the young guys or anything like that. They try and mix the team together in various interesting ways. And you see these guys, they do stuff as a team. They build a team, and it's fascinating to watch. And I think, unbelievable insight into what Coach K has learned about creating a successful everyone always talks about the five fingers becoming a fist. I think that Coach K, in this video, you will see that he recognizes that you become that fist, not just in practice, not just in games, but in everything you're doing as a part of the team. And it's a great video. Go out and watch it. Go watch the Duke. I think it's DukeBluePlanet.com. The latest video, to me, was the most insightful and most interesting one.
Yeah, all the videos are on Duke Blue Planet's YouTube page. So that's usually where I consume them.
It sounds like my Monday. Ladies and gentlemen, for my parting shot, I want to point out that some of you know that the Duke Basketball Report website has a Twitter account, and we are actually going to start to be more active with that Twitter account, as we will take control of it for some live tweeting during football and basketball games. Obviously, all the articles that are posted on the front page of DBR are automatically populated there. And also for this podcast, to, for questions that you want to leave us, or hijacking it for a show if we want to do a live forum where we're answering questions on the fly. So give us a follow. It is at DBRSBN. Again, at DBRSBN. We also hope to have the Facebook page that Duke Basketball Report has more active soon, and it's a great way for all of you out there to stay engaged with Duke basketball and football when you're not listening to us on this podcast. So again, on Twitter, at DBRSBN. I'll post it in the thread for this podcast on the forums, but we hope you guys out there are following us, and if you guys have suggestions on how we can better engage with you guys on Twitter, just let us know. And that's going to do it here for us on episode 126 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and SoundCloud, and we're hoping to get on Spotify very soon. We still have to follow up with them this week. But please, if you do listen to the podcast and you like what you hear, leave us a nice review, because it helps us with our visibility and getting to as many Duke fans as possible like you. We certainly appreciate all of you. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns, send us an email at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. That's it for now. Thank you all so much. And for Jason and Sam, I am Donald. We'll catch you next week. Duke Band, take us home.